A new feature in ActionScript 3 is the addition of a dedicated transform property. This transform property deals with portions of your object's look and feel. The color your object takes on is one such portion. So in this movie, you'll learn how to use the transform property's color transform property to easily change the color of an object. I'll also show you how to change the object's alpha. Here's a simple example of a script drawing a red rectangle on the stage. Let's go ahead and do a control test movie. And there is my red rectangle. Let's go ahead and close the Flash player and look at the code here. I'm setting up a new variable square. I'm making a new shape, putting it into that variable. And then right here, graphics begin fill. I'm filling, having Flash fill that square. And having it draw a rectangle, 50 by 50 by 200 by 200. If you change these values here, you can see how they're going to affect the geometry or the size of my rectangle. In this case, I've set the width to 400 pixels. Let's set it back to 40 pixels. And you can see there is 40 pixels. It's still 200 pixels tall. 50-50 is the coordinate of where it's going to be starting to draw the rectangle. So again, I like to put 0 zeros here, and that gives you a basis for where the rectangle is going to start to draw. So in this case, I'm going to draw a rectangle 400 pixels wide, 200 pixels tall, starting in the upper left-hand corner. Control test movie. There we go. There's my rectangle starting in the upper left-hand corner, 400 pixels wide, 200 pixels tall. Let's move that back to 50 pixels over and 50 pixels down. And let's make that a little bit smaller, 300 pixels wide. Okay, so I've created the rectangle. Now the coloring property is the next set of lines here. You're going to use the color transform class right here to access the RGB property that allows you to specify the color. That's this value here. Let's change this from a red color to a blue color, 0033cc. Control test movie. And now I have a blue color rectangle. First, you need to access the object that contains your color transform. That's this variable here. Do this by accessing your object's square transform property that contains the color transform property. This property returns a value of type color transform that I assign to the variable called myColor. And then go ahead and set the RGB color there. Once you have a reference to your color transform, you can then set the color property directly. myColor.color equals. The color value is of the type UINT. Actually, the color value is the type INT or integer, unassigned integer. It's a hexadecimal representation of your RGB values. The final step is to assign your new color transform object back to the movie clip so that it knows about it. Square.transform.color transform equals myColor semicolon. Now the reason for this is you can't modify the properties in your transform property directly. So you have to first create a new object that stores a reference to the original color transform before modifying it, and then assign it back to the object. Unfortunately, something more straightforward like the following will not work. If I go ahead and let's type in something that seems to be more straightforward. Square.transform.color transform.color equals, and then the value. That will not work there. The only way to assign a different value is to basically assign a new object matching the property you're overwriting. In this example, you assigned a new color transform object to the color transform property. And the last line there is to add the child to the stage by using the addChild method. Notice that there is the object that we're adding, the square. Let me now demonstrate how to set the alpha transparency of your objects. Changing the transparency of objects referred to as alpha in the Flash documentation is really simple. You'll use the alpha property. Square.alpha equals a number ranging between 0 and 1. 0 is transparent, 1 is completely opaque, 0.5 is 50%, 0.9 is 90%, and so on. Let's unremark our second line there. So I'm setting here the alpha of my blue square to 10%. This will be quite transparent. It won't even look blue. It'll look a very light pale blue. And the other extreme is 99%. Notice that will make this pretty much the deep blue that I started with. Again, you want to experiment with these numbers. Let's change it to 40%. And I'm getting that paler blue color. Now if we set the alpha to 0, this is not quite the same as setting the visible property to false. It is invisible, as it would be if you set the visibility to false. However, when you set the visible to false, the object literally can't be seen. Buttons and other interactive objects will not work. If you set your buttons and other interactive objects alpha settings to 0, the buttons and other objects are transparent, but they still will respond. So there's a subtle difference between alpha of 0 and setting the visibility of an object to false. So there you have it, some simple scripts for changing the color and alpha transparency of objects. Let's now move on to the next movie and learn the properties for rotating display objects.